The Second Battle of Fallujah was one of the most intense and brutal urban battles fought by American forces since Vietnam, and perhaps the most fierce U.S. urban combat since Hue in 1968. Taking place in November and December 2004, the operation, code-named Phantom Fury, was launched to break the insurgent stronghold that had turned Fallujah into a fortified sanctuary after months of escalating violence. Unlike many earlier engagements in Iraq, Fallujah was not a war of sweeping maneuver across open desert. It was a grinding block-by-block struggle that pitted Marines, soldiers, and Iraqi commandos against an entrenched network of fighters who had spent months preparing the city with defensive belts, sniper nests, IEDs, booby trap houses, and tunnel networks. Nearly every building had the potential to be a fighting position, and every street corner could conceal danger. The battle's complexity came not only from the close-quarters terrain, but also from the wide variety of weapons and tactics employed by both sides, creating a dense, continuous combat environment. The operation began with a preparatory phase in which U.S. forces isolated Fallujah from surrounding areas. Large Marine and Army units established outer cordon lines to prevent insurgents from reinforcing or escaping the city, while aircraft and artillery began precision strikes on known strongpoints. AC-130 gunships orbited the perimeter at night, using infrared sensors to identify insurgent movements and firing 105mm shells or 40mm cannon bursts into fortified buildings. Overhead, F-15E Strike Eagles and Navy F, divided by a -18S, conducted controlled strikes with laser-guided bombs to weaken safehouses and weapons caches. Unmanned aerial vehicles like the RQ-7 Shadow and Predator drones mapped insurgent positions, tracked fighters moving between buildings, and transmitted live video to command centers. This reconnaissance shaped the urban assault plan, allowing the coalition to identify key kill zones, roadblocks, and ambush sites before the infantry even stepped into the city. When the ground assault began on November 7, 2004, U.S. Marines of the 1st Marine Division and U.S. Army mechanized units from the 2nd Infantry Division attacked from the north. The lead elements included M1A1 Abrams tanks and M2 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles. Abrams were crucial in the opening hours. Their 120mm smoothbore cannons could demolish barricaded firing points from across an intersection, and their thermal sights allowed crews to see through dust, darkness, and smoke, all constant features of Fallujah streets. The Bradleys followed close behind, their 25mm Bushmaster cannons shredding walls, doors, and sniper positions. Their TOW missiles were also used in rare cases when insurgent bunkers had to be destroyed from a distance without leveling entire blocks. Engineers riding in armored bulldozers flattened roadblocks and plowed through insurgent trench lines built across streets, clearing paths for the infantry. As Marines and soldiers pushed deeper, they encountered some of the fiercest urban resistance of the entire Iraq War. Insurgents used AK-47s, PKM machine guns, RPG-7s, mortars, and a vast array of homemade explosives. Many buildings were pre-rigged with IEDs or had interior walls knocked down to form hidden passageways, allowing fighters to move from house to house without exposing themselves. Snipers armed with Dragunov rifles or scoped AK variants fired from windows that had been masked with fabric or debris, making them nearly invisible. Some insurgent teams used shoot-and-scoot tactics, firing a single RPG from a rooftop and immediately disappearing into side streets before American forces could respond. These tactics forced U.S. units to treat every structure as a potential ambush and every door as a potential booby trap. Clearing each city block required a combined arms approach that blended infantry, armor, engineers, artillery, and close air support. Marines advanced building by building, using breaching charges, shotguns, or explosive entry devices to open doors safely. Inside, they moved slowly through rooms and stairwells, often fighting at distances of just a few feet. The M16A4 and M4 carbines were the primary rifles used, often fitted with optics that improved target identification in dark rooms. Squad automatic weapons like the M249 SAW provided suppressive fire during assaults, while heavier M240 machine guns offered sustained coverage during street crossings. When buildings proved too dangerous to enter, particularly those suspected of being rigged with large IEDs, armor or air support was called in. Abrams tanks blasted through exterior walls using their main gun or coaxial machine guns, collapsing positions without risking infantry lives. If the situation demanded even more destructive power, F-15ES or UAV-guided airstrikes delivered precision bombs directly onto insurgent strongholds. Artillery played a surprisingly significant role despite the close-quarters nature of the fight. M198 155mm howitzers and mortars provided high-angle fire to hit rooftop positions and fortified interiors that were difficult for tanks to reach. These were used sparingly inside the city limits to avoid unnecessary destruction, but when insurgent concentrations were detected on the outskirts or in large industrial buildings, artillery fire could break their resistance before Marines moved in. Meanwhile, Navy SEALs and Marine recon units conducted raids on suspected leadership sites, capturing documents, radios, and maps that further exposed the insurgents' defensive layout. Progress through Fallujah was slow but steady. Entire avenues had to be cleared several times because insurgents reoccupied buildings after nightfall. To counter this, Marines established strongpoints every few blocks, fortified houses manned by squads with sandbags, heavy weapons, and fields of fire covering the surrounding streets. These strongpoints created a lattice of secured zones that gradually expanded southward. As resistance concentrated in certain neighborhoods, air support became more aggressive. 10 Warthogs played a critical role, flying low over the city and using their GAU 830mm cannon to destroy barricaded snipers, machine gun nests, or vehicles used by insurgents as mobile firing platforms. The A-10's ability to stay over the city for long periods made it particularly valuable during prolonged firefights. Inside the densest parts of the city, areas like the Jolan district, the fighting rose to its most intense levels. Insurgents fought from underground rooms, alleys only a few feet wide, and courtyards where engagements could turn into chaotic, close-range battles. Marines often relied on grenades, flashbangs, and shotgun breaching to survive these lethal encounters. Many houses had to be cleared multiple times because fighters used crawlspaces or sledgehammer-cut holes to move between structures. At night, units used night vision devices and infrared strobes to coordinate movements, while snipers equipped with M40 rifles or Army M24 systems provided overwatch across narrow streets and rooftops. By late November, U.S. and Iraqi forces had seized most of Fallujah's key districts, though isolated pockets of insurgents continued fighting for days in tiny clusters of houses. Engineers searched for hidden weapons caches and tunnel entrances, often finding rooms packed with mortar rounds, RPGs, and bomb-making equipment. The insurgents who survived either attempted to flee disguised as civilians or regrouped outside the city. By mid-December, organized resistance had ended, though sporadic firefights continued as remaining fighters were hunted down in the ruins. The Battle of Fallujah left a city devastated and transformed. From a military standpoint, the operation demonstrated the sheer difficulty of modern urban warfare. Progress was measured not in miles but in houses. Victory required not just firepower but discipline, coordination, and an ability to adapt to an enemy who blended into the environment. Tanks, aircraft, artillery, small arms, and engineers were all necessary, each used in carefully coordinated ways depending on what each street demanded. The fighting was relentless, violent, and exhausting, and it revealed how even the most advanced military forces can become locked in grueling combat when operating in dense, contested urban terrain. Ultimately, Phantom Fury succeeded in dismantling Fallujah's insurgent sanctuary, but at the cost of a battle that would stand as one of the hardest fought of the entire Iraq War. When the fighting finally ended, Fallujah was almost unrecognizable. Large sections of the city had been destroyed, not just individual buildings, but whole blocks collapsed or burned. Streets were filled with rubble, shattered concrete, broken furniture, and abandoned cars. The scale of destruction made movement extremely difficult for Marines, Iraqi forces, and returning civilians. Inside the city, many bodies still had to be recovered. Medical teams and military police moved carefully through the ruins to find the dead, identify them when possible, and remove them respectfully. This was slow and emotional work made harder by unstable structures and unexploded ordnance scattered around the area. For the Marines who had fought the battle, exhaustion set in immediately. Weeks of high-intensity combat had left them physically depleted and mentally drained. Units rotated to safer positions, cleaned equipment, slept in shifts, and began processing what they had just experienced. Chaplains, medics, and leaders spent a lot of time checking on their people, because even though the battle was over, the emotional pressure hadn't disappeared. Iraqi civilians began returning once the city was secure, but they faced enormous hardships. Many came home to find their houses damaged or gone. Utilities like water, electricity, and sewage had been cut off during the fighting, so basic life in the city was almost impossible at first. Aid groups and the military worked to restore essential services, bring food and medical supplies into the city, and help residents locate missing family members. Iraqi government forces took control inside Fallujah, manning checkpoints and searching for any fighters who might still be hiding. Even though organized resistance had collapsed, small pockets of danger remained: booby-trapped houses, leftover ammunition, and occasional attempts by insurgents to sneak back into the city. In the end, the battle's aftermath was marked by destruction, grief, slow rebuilding, and a heavy emotional weight carried by both soldiers and civilians. The fighting had ended, but the consequences continued shaping life in Fallujah for a long time afterward.